In 2026, America will host the biggest sporting event on Earth. Not the Super Bowl, not the Olympics, the FIFA World Cup. And according to some estimates, the tournament could generate more than $17 billion in economic impact. $17 billion. That's enough money to build thousands of schools, fund massive infrastructure projects, or support entire industries. But here's the question nobody seems to agree on. Will the World Cup actually boost the US economy? Or is the $17 billion promise just another number that sounds amazing on paper, but tells a very different story in reality? Because when economists looked at previous World Cups, what they found was shocking. Some countries celebrated. Others were left with debt, empty stadiums, and broken promises. And what happens in 2026 could reveal whether America is about to score the biggest economic victory in sports history, or repeat mistakes the world has already seen before. Stay with me, because the answer isn't what most people think. The $17 billion headline. Let's start with the number everyone keeps talking about. $17 billion. That's the projected economic impact often associated with the 2026 FIFA World Cup across North America. At first glance, it sounds almost unbelievable. How can a soccer tournament generate that much money? The answer begins with one simple word: visitors. Millions of them. Fans flying in from Europe. Supporters arriving from South America. Tourists coming from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Every one of those visitors spends money. Hotels, restaurants, airlines, ride-sharing services, entertainment, shopping. And unlike many domestic sporting events, World Cup fans often stay for weeks. Imagine hundreds of thousands of people arriving in your city with vacation budgets ready to spend. Now multiply that across multiple host cities. Suddenly, the billions start to make sense. But there's another reason economists get excited. The World Cup doesn't just create spending. It creates attention. For 1 month, the world's eyes are focused on America. Cities become global advertisements. Businesses gain exposure. Tourism boards receive publicity money couldn't easily buy. Supporters of the tournament argue that these benefits can continue long after the final whistle. And that's where the real debate begins. Because economic impact and economic reality are not always the same thing. Here's something surprising. Many economists are skeptical of mega sporting events. Not because they hate sports, but because they've studied what actually happens after the crowds leave. When officials estimate economic impact, they often count every dollar spent by visitors. But critics argue that's only part of the story. Let's say a tourist spends $500 at a restaurant. That's great for the restaurant. But what if local residents avoid downtown because of traffic and crowds? What if regular customers stay home? The city gains one visitor, but loses another customer. Economists call this the substitution effect. Money doesn't always appear from nowhere. Sometimes it simply moves from one place to another. And then there's another issue. Leakage. A tourist might spend money at a hotel. But if that hotel is owned by a large corporation headquartered elsewhere, some of that money leaves the local economy. The same can happen with airlines, booking platforms, and international businesses. So while headlines focus on billions of dollars flowing in, some economists ask a different question. How much actually stays? This is why studies on sporting events often produce wildly different results. One report sees a gold mine. Another sees a modest boost. Both can technically be correct. They're simply measuring different things. Which brings us to a fascinating fact about the United States. America may be uniquely positioned to avoid some of the biggest World Cup problems. Most World Cup hosts face a huge challenge. Infrastructure. They build new stadiums, expand airports, construct transportation systems, and spend billions before a single match is played. Sometimes those investments pay off. Sometimes they don't. Just look at previous tournaments where expensive venues struggled to find long-term use afterward. But the United States enters 2026 with something unusual. Most of the infrastructure already exists. The stadiums are already standing. Many host venues regularly hold NFL games. Airports are already among the busiest in the world. Hotels already serve millions of visitors every year. This changes the economic equation dramatically. Instead of spending tens of billions building facilities from scratch, America can focus more on utilizing assets it already owns. Think of it this way. If someone hands you a fully equipped restaurant and asks you to host a massive dinner party, your costs are far lower than building the restaurant first. That's essentially America's position. And it may explain why some analysts believe the 2026 World Cup could produce stronger returns than many previous tournaments. But having infrastructure doesn't guarantee success, because another challenge is quietly emerging. And it could determine whether the economic gains reach ordinary Americans. When people hear $17 billion, they often imagine money spreading everywhere. But economies don't work that way. Some sectors benefit far more than others. Hotels could see surging demand. Airlines may experience increased bookings. Restaurants near stadiums could be packed. Retail districts may enjoy a temporary boom. But what about everyone else? A manufacturing worker in Ohio? A teacher in Kansas? A software developer working remotely in Colorado? For many Americans, the World Cup may barely change daily life. And that's an important distinction. Economic impact doesn't mean every citizen receives a share of the benefits. The gains are often concentrated. Tourism industries win. Hospitality businesses win. Certain cities win. Others may see little direct effect. This is why politicians and economists sometimes talk past each other. One side sees billions flowing through the economy. The other asks whether average households actually feel the difference. Both questions matter. And the answer depends on where you live, where you work, and how connected your community is to the event. Yet there is one potential benefit that could reach much further than hotels and restaurants. A benefit that's much harder to measure, and potentially far more valuable. The biggest economic benefit of the World Cup might not happen during the tournament at all. It could happen years later. For decades, soccer has grown steadily in the United States. Youth participation has expanded. Professional leagues have matured. Television audiences have increased. But the World Cup has a unique ability to accelerate trends. When a nation hosts the tournament, millions of children watch. Many decide they want to play. Businesses invest. Sponsors increase spending. Media coverage expands. Interest grows. And interest creates markets. Markets create jobs. Jobs create economic activity. This effect is difficult to quantify. No spreadsheet can perfectly predict how many future players, fans, coaches, entrepreneurs, or investors might emerge because of one tournament. But history shows major cultural moments can reshape industries. Sometimes the largest impact isn't immediate spending. It's long-term behavior change. And if soccer continues gaining ground in America, the World Cup could become a catalyst for something much bigger than a single month of matches. But before we declare victory, we need to address one final reality. Because even if the tournament succeeds, it won't solve America's biggest economic challenges. So, will the World Cup save the U.S. economy? The short answer is no. America's economy is worth tens of trillions of dollars. Even a highly successful World Cup is too small to transform the entire system. It won't eliminate inflation. It won't erase national debt. It won't solve housing shortages. And it won't magically make every American richer. But that's not the right question. The better question is this: can the World Cup create meaningful economic benefits? The answer is almost certainly yes. Tourism spending will rise. Businesses will profit. Cities will receive global exposure. Jobs will be created. And America's existing infrastructure gives it advantages many previous hosts never had. The real debate is not whether benefits exist. It's how large they are, who receives them, and how long they last. Maybe the $17 billion promise turns out to be accurate. Maybe it's overstated. We'll only know after the final whistle. But one thing is already certain. For 1 month in 2026, the world will be watching America. Not just as a host. Not just as a sports destination. But as a test case for whether the biggest sporting event on Earth can still deliver the economic miracle so many promise. And when the tournament ends, we'll finally find out whether the World Cup was worth every penny, or whether the biggest victory happened only in the headlines.